Eliza more carefully arranged the final touches on the floral centerpiece for table 7. The delicate lilies and soft white roses stood in stark contrast to the polished crystal glasses and gleaming silverware that surrounded them. The mansion's grand hall brimmed with the city's elite, their sparkling gowns and tailored suits humming with excitement over the upcoming auction of rare and pricey wines. Eliza moved quietly in her plain navy dress and worn flats, trying not to draw attention. As the event's florist, her role was to blend into the background, to make beauty without being noticed. Her southern accent occasionally drew sideways glances and whispered comments. When she passed a wealthy man admiring the setting, he smirked and muttered loud enough to hear, "Does she even know a Cabernet from a Merlot?" A few others chuckled. Eliza's cheeks burned, but she kept her head down, focusing on her task. This world was not hers. She was a modest woman in a room full of polished confidence. The chatter swelled as the auctioneer took the stage. Crystal glasses clinked lightly, and guests prepared to bid, their eyes sparkling with anticipation. The air smelled of polished wood and fine perfume. Suddenly, the sharp gasp that cut through the murmurs came from a table near the back. A boy, no older than 6, convulsed violently in his chair, his eyes rolling as his body stiffened and shook. His mother's startled cry sliced through the crowd, drawing immediate but disorganized gasps and shouts from guests unsure of how to react. In that instant of mounting panic, Eliza's breath caught, but instead of retreating, she stepped forward, propelled not by hope, but by habit. The sudden convulsions seized the boy, throwing him forward in his chair, his limbs jerking uncontrollably. Around Eliza, the once festive crowd shifted uneasily, many frozen in shock or uncertain about what to do in this unfamiliar emergency. A wealthy woman gasped loudly, clutching her pearl necklace as she whispered frantic prayers. An elderly man shuffled back, murmuring about calling the staff, while a few guests leaned in, their phones already out but hesitating to dial. Eliza's heart pounded as instinct took over. She moved swiftly but with no trace of panic, weaving through the crowd toward the child. Voices rose in confusion. A loud voice near her scoffed, "What's she thinking? A florist trying to play doctor?" The man, tall and sharply dressed in a tailored suit, sneered. "Leave it to the professionals." But Eliza disregarded him, every ounce of her training kicking in. Kneeling beside the boy, Eliza gently but firmly pressed a hand to clear his airway, tilting his head back just enough to open the passage. She checked his pulse, her fingers steady as she listened for breath sounds. "Sir," she called to a nearby hotel staffer, "please get me water and call emergency services. Let them know it's a seizure." Her voice was calm, unwavering, commanding attention without demanding it. The mother was frozen, tears flooding her face as she clutched the child's arm. Eliza reached out, softly touching the woman's shoulder to reassure her without breaking her focus. "Stay calm. We're going to take care of him." The mother nodded, trembling. Nearby guests began to murmur, the earlier sneers drowned out as they watched Eliza's determined and informed movements. She directed someone beside her to gently cradle the boy's head, stabilizing it to prevent injury during the violent jerkings. "Clear the area, give us space," she ordered, scanning the crowd for additional help. A waiter hesitated, then moved back, creating a small clearing. The boy's convulsions continued, but Eliza maintained her composed rhythm. She adjusted his limbs carefully, ensuring he didn't strike anything sharp. "This will pass," she told those close enough to hear, her voice steady in the growing tension. Some guests glanced at each other, uncertainty mixing with admiration. A young woman whispered to a companion, "She's doing what the paramedics do." The earlier mocking voice was silent now, speechless in the face of Eliza's competence. Minutes dragged, though to Eliza it felt like seconds, until the violent shaking began to subside. The boy's body relaxed, his breathing uneven but stable. Eliza didn't move away. She sat close, monitoring his airway, signaling the mother to keep calm and watchful. The hotel staffer returned, water in hand, and dialed emergency services. An arrival was soon expected. Eliza watched the crowd shift from anxious spectators to respectful witnesses as whispers spread about the woman who stepped beyond her designated role to save a child. As the boy's eyes fluttered open, weak and confused, his mother leaned close, whispering comfort. Eliza smiled gently, relief flooding through her despite the tense atmosphere. She gave clear instructions to clear the way once EMS arrived, guiding the crowd to make space without chaos. The arrival of the emergency responders brought quick, professional assessments. One paramedic approached, nodding at Eliza with a quiet acknowledgement. "You did well," he said softly, taking over the boy's care. "You saved him from injury." The crowd, now hushed and attentive, watched as the boy was stabilized and lifted onto a stretcher. The mother's trembling hands clung to Eliza's, gratitude shining through tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my son." No words from the onlookers could match the profound silence that replaced earlier mockery. Phones lowered, guests' eyes fixed on the florist who had transformed into a calm protector under pressure. The man who had mocked her earlier avoided eye contact, shifting uneasily. Eliza stood, breath steadying as she brushed her hands on her simple dress. Some attendees avoided her gaze, others surprised, some openly curious. Murmurs now softened to appreciation. "She handled that beautifully. I can't believe she kept it together." A well-dressed woman approached cautiously, offering a small, sincere smile. "That was remarkable. I didn't expect, thank you." Eliza nodded politely, though she preferred to fade back into the background. The auction slowly resumed, but the energy was different, respect and newfound acknowledgement rippling through the crowd. Eliza gathered her tools quietly, the lingering tension easing into a shared sense of relief and gratitude. Her training had surfaced instinctively, her skills unforgotten despite years away. In the midst of wealth and privilege, it was her quiet expertise that had turned panic into calm, the difference between harm and healing. As guests whispered among themselves, Eliza moved toward the exit, her heart still racing but steady, no longer invisible, though she remained silent about the life she'd once led. Eliza's mind drifted back to a time when her life had revolved not around delicate petals and vases, but flashing lights and urgent calls. Years ago, beneath the hum of city streets, she had been a paramedic, a steady force amid chaos. She remembered the sharp scent of antiseptic mingling with exhaust fumes as she first laced her boots, the sturdy uniform fitting snug and familiar, a symbol of purpose. Those early shifts were a crucible, testing her resolve as sirens screamed through night fog, and she navigated labyrinthine alleyways to reach those in desperate need. She recalled rushing a young man trapped in a car wreck to the hospital, feeling the rapid beat of his pulse fade under her hands, only to grasp at steadying breaths and administer life-saving measures until surgeons could take over. The nights when she held a frightened child's hand through emergency surgery, or talked down a patient struggling to breathe, were etched into her memory with vivid clarity. Eliza had thrived on the rush and responsibility, her instincts sharp, her heart steady under pressure. But behind her professionalism, there was a tender core. She carried stories of pain and hope in equal measure. Sometimes, late at night, she replayed the faces of those she couldn't save, the weight of each loss settling heavy in her chest. Then, a sudden turning point, the life she had built outside the hospital. Her husband, David, had been her steadfast companion through grueling shifts and quiet moments alike. But one rainy night, the phone call came that shattered everything. He'd been in a fatal accident, a reckless driver sending their world spiraling. Grief swallowed her, leaving her breathless and hollow. The urgent calls that once energized her now felt like unbearable ghosts. Burnout set in swiftly. Eliza found herself flinching at sirens, struggling with the relentless pace and unrelenting grief. She made the painful choice to step away, retreating from the city's chaos to the quiet embrace of a small town, seeking solace in simplicity. Adjusting wasn't easy. Money was tight, and without David's steady income, she took up work where she could. The florist's shop was a refuge. It allowed her to create beauty from life's fragility, to express care through gentle arrangements rather than adrenaline-fueled emergencies. But even as she arranged flowers and tended blooms, a part of her remained tethered to her old skills, practiced and waiting beneath the surface. Her young son, Michael, was the center of her new world. His laughter was balm to her fractured heart, and she cherished quiet evenings reading stories beneath soft lamplight. Yet the weight of living modestly, far from the role she once embodied, left her with bittersweet regret. Sometimes, watching emergency vehicles pass by, she felt a dull ache, a calling she thought had been silenced. Eliza's soft hands, now stained faintly with soil and greenery, had once held the fragile bodies of strangers, steadying breath and coaxing life back from the brink. She recalled the drills, the training sessions that once sharpened her reflexes, the careful memorization of protocols, the hours spent absorbing knowledge she never imagined would gather dust. Her past life wasn't one she shared lightly. The hospital city and her tight circle were worlds away from the genteel gatherings she now served. Many of the town's residents didn't know her deeper story. She had become accustomed to blending into the background, a simple florist quietly arranging scenes of celebration while her own past remained a quiet secret. Yet, that history was never far beneath the surface. The instincts she had honed years before came rushing back, clear and urgent, when the boy convulsed at the auction. It was like waking from sleep, muscle memory and careful knowledge stepping forward to fill the space panic left behind. Despite her escape, Eliza carried the experiences of crisis and compassion in equal measure. She remembered the rush of adrenaline balanced with the calm rationality that had kept so many safe, not from a place of bravado, but deep training and confidence earned through countless trials. Her gaze softened as she thought about David. The loss had carved a silence within her, but it had also deepened her understanding of fragility and courage. The boy's mother's frightened face at the auction had mirrored emotions she knew well, fear touched by hope. As memories floated through her mind, Eliza felt a quiet reckoning. She was no longer just a woman who arranged flowers, she was someone who had stood at the edge of life and death before. The years had weathered her, but not diminished the core strength that had driven her to priority and calm. Arriving back in the present, Eliza's breath even and measured, she straightened her shoulders. Her hands itched, not to arrange stems, but to steady, to heal. Though life had taken unexpected turns, her past had shaped her deeply. It was a story of resilience rooted not in loud declarations, but in silent acts of courage. The auction hall awaited her next move, but for Eliza, stepping back into that space carried a new weight, one of unresolved potential, waiting patiently beneath her quiet exterior. As the last echoes of the auctioneer's hammer faded, the atmosphere in the grand hall felt subtly shifted. The whispers no longer carried scorn or disinterest but curiosity and respect. Eliza stood quietly by the side, folding a gauzy ribbon into her bouquet arrangement, but it was impossible for her to remain unnoticed any longer. Guests, once indifferent or dismissive, now looked toward her with lingering glances, some even approaching cautiously. The boy's mother, still clutching her son's hand, made her way through the crowd toward Eliza. Tears shimmered in her eyes, and her voice caught as she approached. I can't thank you enough. You saved him," she said, her tone trembling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Around them, a small group gathered, drawn by the emotional exchange. "I'm just glad he's okay," Eliza replied softly, offering a gentle smile. She noticed the mother's hands still trembling and placed a reassuring one over them. "You did everything right by staying calm." The mother nodded, unable to speak further, but her gaze lingered on Eliza with profound relief. The guests nearby watched closely, the soft murmur of acknowledgement spreading through the room. Several people who had been present earlier began recording snippets of the incident on their phones, capturing Eliza's composed and decisive actions. Within moments, the clips appeared online, shared on social media platforms where they quickly attracted attention. The video showed Eliza kneeling beside the convulsing child, her hands steady as she managed the crisis with the confidence of a seasoned professional. Comments appeared, praising her calm demeanor and quick thinking. "Who is this woman?" asked one viewer. Another wrote, "A true hero in plain sight." Among those attending were a handful of event staff members who now viewed Eliza in a new light. A young waiter, who had been hesitant throughout the emergency, approached her later, saying, "I was so scared, but you just knew what to do. You really saved him." His eyes shone with admiration. Even the wealthy man who had earlier mocked her tactic avoided her altogether now. A few guests who had earlier whispered derisively about her accent and appearance now nodded respectfully in greeting. The invisible florist was becoming remarkably visible. As the news of the incident spread beyond the hall, local community forums and pages picked up the story. An interview with the boy's mother appeared on a regional news site, her voice steady as she publicly praised the woman who had saved her child amid strangers and high society. "Without her calm and quick action, things could have been so much worse," she said, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Soon, curious onlookers and supporters found online footprints of Eliza's past. Faded photographs from her paramedic days surfaced, showing her poised in uniform, her youthful face lit with determination. Old colleagues posted messages commending her dedication and skill from years before. One wrote, "Eliza Moore was one of the best paramedics I've known, selfless and steady." Another shared a link to a community health seminar she had once hosted. These revelations stirred a wave of admiration that extended beyond the event guests. Invitations arrived at the florist shop in her small home, asking if she might participate in safety workshops or community first aid classes. People who had only known her as a quiet, unassuming florist now saw a woman whose strength and expertise transcended her present role. Despite the growing recognition, Eliza remained humble, often deflecting praise quietly. Yet, beneath her modesty, a flicker of pride kindled. For a long time, she had concealed her abilities and her tragic past. Now, she felt as though a door, once closed, had begun to open. Her co-workers at the floral shop treated her differently too. They no longer ignored her presence or limited conversations to work-related instructions. Her manager paused by her side one afternoon with an apologetic smile. "Eliza, I didn't realize what you did. You were incredible." The comment was simple but meant more than words could convey. At community gatherings and through messages, people reached out with sincere offers of support and opportunities to share her knowledge. Eliza felt the weight of invisibility lifting, replaced by a slow but steady recognition that her past and her present could coexist. One evening, as she sat alone arranging flowers by the window, a notification from a local news outlet appeared, an article titled "Local Florist Becomes Unexpected Hero." The piece detailed the night's events and offered insight into Eliza's background as a paramedic, celebrating her courage and calm composure. Reading the words, Eliza felt the complexities of her life settle around her like a quilt, frayed but warm. She allowed herself a small smile. The woman who had once been confined to the margins of this elite world was beginning to be seen, not just as a florist or a background figure, but as a capable, valued person with a story worth telling. The recognition did not erase her grief or struggles, but it offered something else, a chance to embrace her whole self. Her past resilience and the quiet strength that had helped save a child could no longer be hidden behind plain dresses and silent work. With evening light streaming softly through the window, Eliza looked forward with newfound subtle confidence. The night of the auction had changed more than just the mood in the hall, it had changed how the world saw her. And perhaps, how she saw herself too. Days turned into weeks since the wine auction incident, and life had settled into a new rhythm for Eliza Moore, though nothing felt quite the same. The steady hum of the florist shop had regained its familiar cadence, but now she carried an unspoken undercurrent of change beneath the quiet floral scents. Her phone buzzed more often with messages, requests to speak at community events, invitations for first aid training sessions, and heartfelt notes from people she barely knew but who revered her actions during the emergency. One bright morning, as Eliza unpacked a crate of gardenias, the shop door chimed softly. She looked up to see a woman in a pressed business suit, carrying a leather portfolio. The woman's eyes sparkled with professional warmth. "Eliza Moore?" she asked. Eliza nodded cautiously, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm Claire Bennett, coordinator for the Metropolitan Paramedic Recertification Program. We heard about your involvement at the auction, how you managed that emergency so expertly. We'd like to offer you a spot in our upcoming advanced training and instructor preparation course." Eliza blinked, surprise flickering across her face. The offer felt unreal. The woman representing the very field she had stepped away from was reaching out directly. I appreciate the offer," Eliza said slowly. "I'm not sure if I'm ready to." Claire smiled gently, cutting through the hesitation. "I understand. What you did was incredible, but more than that, we think you could inspire others, especially those who have stepped away from the field and hesitate to return. Your skills are needed. The program can work around your schedule, and support is available." Eliza's mind flicked to her son Michael playing upstairs and the fragile balance she maintained between mother and provider. The thought of returning to emergency work stirred a knot of fear and excitement both. "I'll think about it," she finally said. Claire pressed a card into her hand and gave a reassuring nod before stepping out, leaving a quiet possibility hanging in the air. That afternoon, Eliza sat at her kitchen table, the card resting beside a warm cup of tea. The memory of the auction flooded back, the boys' abrupt fall, the chaos around them, and her hands moving instinctively to save a life. Faces of gratitude, the sudden shift from dismissal to respect, all of it vivid and clear. She thought about the long years spent hiding from her past, the sorrow that had pulled her away. And yet, beneath the grief, a spark remained, uneasy but alive. Her son bounded into the kitchen, a bright smile lighting his cheeks. "Mom, did you get a new flower for the shop?" he asked, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he had gathered. Eliza smiled warmly, brushing his hair back. "Yes, Michael. I did." Later, she walked along the quiet street near the local park, the soft rustling of leaves accompanying her thoughts. It hadn't been an easy choice to leave her paramedic career behind, but perhaps it wasn't a door closed forever, it was waiting, gently cracked, inviting her once more. Calling Claire the next day took courage, but when she heard the warmth in the reply, Eliza felt a small surge of strength. She agreed to visit the training center and meet the instructors. The subsequent weeks were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. Returning to the training facility was like stepping into a different world, bright classrooms, mannequins rigged for emergency drills, and the sharp scent of antiseptics mingling with the buzz of eager trainees. Though she had felt distant, Eliza's skills returned swiftly, a lifetime of experiences rooted in muscle memory and calm determination. Her instructors, many unaware of her past, quickly recognized her aptitude. She excelled in advanced techniques and offered thoughtful insights during simulations. Gradually, she was invited to assist in instruction, a role she hadn't anticipated but embraced with quiet confidence. Balancing new responsibilities with life at home kept her grounded. Michael's pride in his mother blossomed, his eager curiosity about her new school, bringing light-hearted questions and drawings of ambulances on the refrigerator door. One late evening after a particularly demanding training session, Eliza sat in the facility's break room, tired but content. She pulled out her phone and reread messages from the auction guests and the boy's mother, words of thanks and encouragement. In those lines, she found affirmation, not just of what she'd done, but of who she was becoming again. Her past, once a weighted silence, had transformed into a source of hope and renewed purpose. At the florist shop, things began to shift subtly too. Customers who had once regarded her with polite distance now greeted her warmly, seeking her opinion and sharing stories of admiration about the auction incident. Small bouquets ordered included notes of thanks and appreciation for the woman who had saved a child's life. Eliza's manager stopped her one busy afternoon. "You've brought something new here, Eliza," he said with a slow smile. "People see you now, not just as the florist, but as someone who makes a real difference." The words settled deeply within her, mingling with memories and the possibilities before her. Months passed. Eliza stood in front of a group at a community center, dressed in a neat uniform marked with the emblem of the paramedic program. Around her, an attentive crowd listened as she demonstrated emergency response techniques, her voice steady and clear. She guided hands to assess breathing, explained the importance of calming a scene, and shared the story of her night at the auction where a child's life had been saved by knowing what to do. Her eyes shone with a quiet joy, a calm she hadn't felt in years. Later, Michael hugged her tightly after the session, whispering proudly, "Mom, you're my hero." Eliza smiled, her heart full. The journey she'd taken, from loss and withdrawal to rediscovery and strength, was far from easy, but it had brought her here, standing tall, visible, and ready. In the stillness of her home that night, Eliza looked in the mirror. The paramedic uniform fit her anew, a symbol of resilience, compassion, and acceptance of all parts of herself. With steady breaths and a calm heart, she stepped forward into this next chapter, not invisible, not afraid, but whole.